Good morning. It is 9 a.m. and so we will go ahead and get started. Thank you so much for being here. My name is Josh Steele and I serve as the Assistant Vice Provost of Online Learning and Academic Programs here at the University of Tennessee. Myself and our office are thrilled to host this week's Online Learning Week, our first event, our first week-long event to really celebrate the successes of online learning on our campus, but also to look to the future and think about our future goals as a campus and where we're headed in online learning. I wanted to get us started and kick off our symposium with just an overall conversation about who is the online UT student and what do we mean when we talk about the online student. And so first question is, what best describes your role in online learning at UT? Got a mix of faculty and staff, one grad student, great. Excellent, thank you. And while I do have a presentation that I'll go through, I am curious if there's anything that you hope that I will cover in this presentation, and that way I can be mindful of that as I go through my slides. So this is just open response. If nothing, that's fine, but I want to make sure if people have specific questions. Demographics, great. I will definitely touch on demographics. Leave it open for another 30 seconds or so. Student feedback, student expectations, trends, new resources. Ways to support students. UT's attitude towards online, great. All right, I think I should be able to please all of you because I can definitely touch on all of these topics, so thank you. Let's see. Assessment, great. All right, thank you. So going back to the initial question at hand, so who are we talking about? When we say an online UT student, what is the focus of this presentation and who is Josh talking about? And so I do want to be clear, and what I have on the screen is an image, a pretty classic, traditional image of residential students, right, on the pedestrian walkway, walking between classes. This is not the group that I'm going to be talking about today, even though we know that this population of primarily of residential students, they are actually engaged in online courses, and online courses do support them on their journey. So we do know that in fall 2021, nearly half of our residential undergraduate students took at least one online course, so 49.5% of our residential undergraduate students. In fall 2022, we have nearly 24,000 online seats taken by residential undergraduate students, which amounts to just under 62,000 credit hours. So I just want to state that my focus on this presentation on not talking about this population does not in any way mean that that experience is not significant on our campus. So we know that, in fact, right now, the majority of the credit hours that are taken online is that residential student population. But I still want to focus on a new population, and that is the students who are enrolled in our fully online or distance education programs, of which in fall 2022, we have a little bit over 1,800 students. And the reason why I want to focus on this is that there's been a lot of conversation over the course of the last year or so since the publication of the strategic vision, that this is a group that the university wants to do more to attract. We want to provide more pathways for these students. We want to be a potential destination for people who perhaps can't attend college in the quote-unquote traditional way that we've typically offered a bachelor's, or undergraduate, or graduate programs. Of this 1,828 students enrolled in fall 2022, right now, most of them are graduate students. The majority of our fully online programs are graduate programs. But we have a small contingent, about 160 or so right now, but growing group of fully online undergraduate students, and that's a group that we're absolutely interested in growing over the course of the next several years. So a few people asked about demographics, and so I am happy to say that I have an entire slide dedicated to demographics. So what do we know about these students? So these 1,828 students who are in one of our fully online pathways. Right now, 74% of them are female. And sometimes this is surprising to some people. When you look at the literature, there's a lot that's been written about the high percentage of female students in online programs, and there's a lot of thoughts and reasons around why that is the case, about the typical other obligations that tend to fall on women, that online learning or online degree programs can maybe support their lives in a better way. We also know that there's been a lot written in the last couple of years about the decline of male enrollment in higher education. What we know about our at UT specifically is that we do exceed the general averages for the percentage of women enrolled in an online program. There's probably a few reasons for that at UT. One of the biggest is that our largest programs, or those that have been offering a fully online program for the longest time on our campus, they've been in fields that tend to have a high population of women who are in those fields in the first place. So some of our largest programs in social work, in nursing, as well as even information science. All three of those programs, which are three of our largest programs, they all enroll more than 80% women, and in some cases more than 90%. So that is driving that metric a little bit higher than what you might see at other institutions. The average age of our fully online students is 32. And what's really remarkable about that is sometimes we might think that this would vary by degree level, and for us that's actually not the case. So the average age of a student enrolled in one of our online doctoral programs is 32. The average age of a student enrolled in one of our online master's programs, it's about 32. And the average age of a student enrolled in one of our online bachelor's programs is 31.7, so rounding up to 32. So really, it's really interesting to see that no matter what degree level these students are coming into, that average age stays consistent. Now, if you know something about averages and statistics, averages can be lifted by higher numbers on the top end. So for those of you who are interested, the median age across the board for all of these programs is between 28 and 29 as well. So really, when we're looking at this student population, by and large, these are absolutely students who are over the age of 25, even in our undergraduate program, and most often in their late 20s to early to mid 30s. 69% of our students are in Tennessee. Sometimes that surprises people as well, because we think once you open up online opportunities, students will come from everywhere. And to some extent that is true. So even though only 31% of our students reside outside of Tennessee, we do have students in 44 states and a few international locations as well. So we certainly have students from all across the country and beyond who are enrolled. But the literature really supports that a lot of students are looking for, even when they're attending online, they like to go to an institution that they're either familiar with or that they reside nearby to. And nearby being within about 150 miles tends to be the trend. I think it's around 70 to 80% of students enrolled online tend to enroll within 150 miles of a physical campus. Now, there are a few very, very large fully online institutions that buck that trend through a lot of marketing and have attracted a national recognition. But for online learning, by and large, this tends to remain fairly local. So these three demographic points we know from just the students who are enrolled in our program. We can look at the data and the student information system. We can pull this pretty easily as an institution. The next few things are things that we don't really collect normally through our normal operations. And so we wanted to get to know our distance education or our online students a little bit better. And so last fall, we actually requested that they fill out a survey. So we sent a survey to all of our fully online students to ask them a bit more about their lives. And so what we learned in that survey, so of the respondents now, so for survey respondents, nearly 3/4 of them are working more than 30 hours a week, which are pretty close to full time. So we know then that these students are attracted to online probably because they are spending large portions of their time throughout the week employed, and makes it harder to come to campus. 37% of our survey respondents indicated that they were caring for someone aged 18 or younger in the home. So in addition to work, they are balancing care for a younger member of their family. And then 41% of survey respondents identified as first generation, or being the first in their families to graduate from college. What's really remarkable about that is that we need to remember that most of our students right now in an online program are graduate students. So these students were the first in their families to get an undergraduate degree or earn their bachelor's degree, and then they continued on and will be the first in their families to earn a graduate degree as well. So that number is really astonishing when you recognize the fact that nearly 90% of the students that we surveyed were in a graduate program, and they were the first in their families to actually get their undergraduate degree, which unlocked the opportunity to enter into a graduate degree. We also ask students if they provide care for anybody else. So we have that 37% number for respondents as far as who is providing care for a younger person in the family, a child, but whom else do you provide care? And this was open response, and we just have a few of the examples of who people listed, grandparents, partners, children over the age of 18 with different circumstances, siblings, sisters, other elderly family members, those who are ill. And so again, it really just speaks to the remarkable amount of balancing that students who are enrolled in a fully online program must do. And I think one of the questions that we get sometimes when we talk about growing our online programs and online offerings is a question of, is it quote unquote cannibalizing our existing programs on campus? And I think we can agree that when we look at the demographics of who these programs are attracting right now, and what else is going on in these students' lives, that really attending in having a residential experience is probably not likely for many of them, and online may be the only way in which they're able to earn their degree. And so this is just a mantra that I hold dear when we're talking about these students, is really the online UT student. They're a trailblazer because they're the first in their families to attend college. They're balancing career and multiple familiar responsibilities while attending their program. And that's something that I think is always great to keep in mind as we start new programs, and as more of us are engaged in this work to provide pathways for this fully online population, is like really just, I'm always in awe of what these students are accomplishing, and how they're managing all of the different responsibilities in their lives, while also, oh, by the way, earning a degree from a top public university. And so I alluded to this survey, and so what follows is I'm going to give some direct kind of open response feedback that we received from this survey, but just a little bit more about that project. So we administered this survey in fall 2021, and we received 416 responses, which we find to be pretty meaningful. It was a 26% response rate. If you know anything about student surveys, that is borderline ridiculous how amazing that response rate is. And I think it really spoke to how excited these students were to really give us insights into their lives and into their programs, and to share with us so that we can use that information to continue to inform program creation and the services and resources that we provide. So first off, I want to say that these students are incredibly grateful in many cases to be in an online program at UT. And so we had so many wonderful positive comments about their experience. And so this student, I've developed meaningful relationships with my fellow students and teacher. I was skeptical that one could have a close-knit academic community online, but the department has done an amicable job in being able to create that. This student, my experience has been great. The online learning program fits my work and personal schedule very well, and the instructors have all been easily accessible and eager to help us. And then the student, I have enjoyed the program's flexibility and accommodations with my military schedule. And we didn't really talk about that in the demographics, but yes, we do have quite a few either active duty or veteran students who are enrolled in our programs. And again, that flexibility that online programs can provide really helps us to provide new opportunities to a population that, of course, we have a military affiliated population on campus, but online allows us to perhaps bring even more to UT. And so as far as feedback that these students gave to think about as we develop programs, I'm boiled it down into 3 recommendations that really were salient across a lot of the different kind of responses that students gave. So we're going to focus on course scheduling, the idea of dedicated support, and then communication. So scheduling considerations. So this student is enrolled, it looks like primarily in a synchronous program, so a program that meets fairly regularly. And they say many of my synchronous classes could be offered asynchronously or a hybrid. For full-time employees and almost full-time students, the workload would be easier to manage without being in class once a week for over 3 hours. Additionally, another student in a similar situation, I'd appreciate more asynchronous classes. Some of the classes I'm interested I cannot take because they are always scheduled when I have to work. This person recognizes that they're scheduled at a good time, so they say, I appreciate all of the online night classes, but not everyone works a typical 9 to 5, right? So they're recognizing, hey, the program does a great job. They offer the courses at night, which tends to work for many working adults, but for my personal schedule, that's not working for me. And just when we think we have it figured out, and the answer is surely we should just scrap synchronous and go fully to asynchronous, this student says, I would appreciate more synchronous work, especially when instruction is necessary to better understand topics being covered. So we're kind of darned if we do, darned if we don't. And this came up all throughout the survey. There were a lot of students saying, I want more asynchronous. And then there were quite a few students saying, I want more synchronous. So what do we do with that information? Don't worry, I'll get to that. Some other scheduling considerations. So this student says, again, I like that our courses are synchronous with the option to review class recordings. So they're speaking to, like, maybe there's an option, like it's live and I can attend synchronously or I can watch it afterwards. But then this point at the end, I like how several of my classes have involved partner work or group work through the Zoom breakout rooms for projects and papers. So they're really appreciating that interaction amongst their classmates. But then, of course, this student says, yeah, my classes have been wonderful. I've learned a lot. However, there's too much group focus in many of my classes. So again, there's a recognition here that all students, of course, need different things. They're going to respond to different types of environments in different ways. And so that does pose a challenge, and there's not a magic cure-all that we can recommend as far as scheduling. But there's some things that we can consider. So I think often we focus on asynchronous and synchronous as these kind of distinct binaries, right? So if a course is asynchronous, that means there will be 0 scheduled time. And maybe we don't even build in that opportunity for people to attend, even in an optional way. This is a class that you can, it's still an engaging course, but it's a course that you don't have to log in at any given time, and it's fully flexible to meet your schedule, right? So that's asynchronous in this camp. And then when we say it's synchronous, we tend to subscribe to if it's a 3-credit course, in a 15-week semester-long course, that means we need to meet 3 hours every week. So a synchronous course then has to meet for 3 hours. And I think what we see in the feedback is perhaps there might be some sort of happy medium in the middle where there is still a synchronous option that is not 3 hours every single week. And that's what came up in some of the feedback. It's like, yeah, maybe some synchronous, but if it could be reduced by half, because if it was like an hour and a half a week, or maybe every other week, or if there was optional opportunities. I think more opportunities to build in flexibility seems to be something that the students responded fairly positively to. I know that this is really challenging, but I think what we see in the feedback is students really like it if there's some sort of balance amongst their classes. So if they're taking multiple classes in a semester, is there any way for the schedule of those classes to be aligned so that if if I'm in a synchronous program, maybe I'm not in 3 synchronous courses that each meet 3 hours. But if I'm enrolling in these courses, maybe one of them is asynchronous, one of them is maybe a hybrid, whether it's an hour a week or every other week, and the other course is synchronous. And I'll give an example of this, a personal example. So prior to my career in education, I worked in retail, and I was a retail manager for several years. And as I kind of grew into that career and thought that would be the career that I had for a larger portion of my life, I became kind of like a regional training manager, right? And so I would be responsible for delivering trainings to my location and other locations. And at that point, I really wanted to go back to school, and I wanted to get a master's degree. And thinking about well, first off, this was several years ago, and there were not nearly as many online options, and so really that opportunity wasn't available to me. But even in an online setting, if I wanted to get my master's degree at that point, and I wanted to talk to my supervisor about what I would need, and if I needed 2 or 3 nights dedicated to school, the answer at that point would have been no, right? Because I worked retail, I needed to close certain nights, so I needed to be available until 10 or 11 p.m. And so that was just never going to be an opportunity for me. Much like the student feedback previously that said that they don't work a 9-to-5 job. And so anytime we're able to think as a program and create that balance to provide an opportunity for that student is great. Because if I could come and say, you know what, it's gonna be 1 night a week, and that will help, and if I can get 1 night a week off, that was probably something that I would have been able to negotiate with my employer. So that's just something to consider as we think about opportunities and how we can expand our offerings to wider populations. And then as much as we can ensure that, as I just talked about, this kind of like hybrid every other week, or all different types of permutations on ways in which we can think about synchronous, then expressing that clearly to students. And I'm going to acknowledge right now that sometimes that can be challenging to express in the timetable, and there's a lot of different ways in which you can do it. We've had wonderful conversations with the registrar's office, who is there to support you if you're kind of trying to think through how you can get this information to students through like notes or different ways in which it can be reflected. So know that we know that kind of like the standard defaults might make that challenging to think of these unique hybrid approaches to synchronous education and putting that in the timetable. But the registrar's office has been able to talk through that with a few departments that we've worked with, and it's definitely been helpful. And students definitely gave the feedback that it's good to know what to expect before the semester begins. So as much as we can do that, that would be really helpful. And to kind of wrap up the scheduling component, this is another student quote that kind of hits on a lot of this. I'm thankful to have the synchronous option, but having a blend is really great. Something that was synchronous maybe twice a month and asynchronous the rest of the time, that in-person 3-hour demand is a struggle. So those are just some recommendations, again, recognizing that there's not one schedule that's going to please everybody, but that flexibility and that kind of hybrid approach seemed to be something that students responded really well to. Moving on, the next recommendation that came up in the feedback is just this idea around dedicated support for students who are in online programs. So this student said, the advisors of my program are doing a great job keeping students informed and helping us along the way. And again, kind of having that one person that you know is your go-to can be really helpful for these students who don't have the same opportunities to negotiate the various services and resources that exist for residential students. Separately, for this student, they said it would be nice if we could have an advisor that we could communicate with, or that would make an effort to help with any difficulties while in the program. So this is a program where maybe that structure doesn't exist yet. And so they're indicating, you know what, I wish that I had somebody that I could go to. And we know that these students, of course, are in classes, right? They have their faculty members that they can go to. But in this case, they're saying, you know what, having someone else that I can confide in and work with in this transition in my life would really help me out. And then this student said, you know what, if it could be like mandatory that I meet with an advisor on a semester by semester basis just to make sure that I'm on track and check in on how I'm doing with balancing all of the other obligations of my life, at the end ask about potential classes and coursework balancing, that would be great. And so I think this just really speaks to, again, students having someone in their corner. And really, I think it boils down to having one source of contact to know, like, okay, maybe I don't know where to go with this question, but is there someone that I know that I can reach out to, that I feel comfortable reaching out to, who's there? And even if they're not the person who's going to solve this for me, they at least can give me some information and some ideas on how to respond to this situation, or what resource I should look into, or things of that nature. Sometimes I think of these as like a concierge, or like a student's liaison, really to support them on their journey, in addition to the faculty who they're working with in their respective courses. And I also recognize this is a different model than what we think about typically in graduate education, right, where there's usually a faculty advisor. And I think the faculty advisor model is still great for online students and online programs. I still think there's maybe a help to having an advisor who knows the entire program, who again is really full-time plugged into the various resources and opportunities that exist across the campus. And then communication. I'm shifting gears here. I'm not going to, these are not student quotes, but these are just themes that distilled out of some very specific quotes about communication that I wanted to share. And so some of the students mentioned that, hey, it'd be really great if the communication around onboarding is really clear and concise, so I know what to expect. And so really what is a student supposed to be doing once they get that admissions letter and they're excited and they're entering the program? What are the next steps? What takes them from that moment on until the start of their classes? Some students kind of alluded to the fact that when in the absence of emails, I kind of assume that I'm missing something, or there's something that I should be doing. So if there's nothing that they should be doing, we can tell them there's nothing that they should be doing, right? And say, you can hold tight until this date when we're gonna provide information about an orientation. So just ways that in which we can think about the program onboarding. Students really said, hey, that would be really wonderful if there could be more communication around what that's supposed to look like, and how I start my classes and register for my classes. We touched on the scheduling, registration, communication a little bit as far as what's listed and how courses are listed. But yes, just communication about when is it time to re-enroll for classes, and what are the classes, and should I meet with an advisor? Just communications around that, students said, would be really helpful. They'd love to be involved and learn more about departmental events and opportunities. Quite a few students mentioned that they do get information from the departments, and in some cases they feel as though that information maybe is geared a little towards the in-person population. And so any opportunities that we have to specifically communicate with students who are enrolled in an online program helps them feel seen and valued, and that these are, we've curated or customized these experiences for this population. And then finally, just general reminders about resources. So and I'll talk about this a bit in a little bit, we are doing more to ensure that students understand what resources that they have available to them as an online student, but we can inundate them with information at an orientation all we want, and I'm guilty of this. I was invited to speak at the graduate student orientation, and I unleashed all of these resources that online students have access to. But that follow through, when at that point they're focused on so much, they're learning so much about their new programs. So what opportunities do we have to come back and kind of remind them about mental health services and writing support and things like that are available to them, and how they can access it. So this isn't all on programs. So with this feedback, I just want to be transparent about some things that are a focus of our office, and what we're working to do to support the student population as well. So number one, more choice. So having more programs, more opportunities, more courses, things like that. Students definitely identified that in the survey. As we add more certificates and concentrations of majors, and it just provides more elective choices for students really to customize and curate their program in a way that aligns with their career goals. So that is absolutely something that we are focused on. I mentioned student support services, so we've done some work to really refine the messaging on what students have access to. There were some downright shocking things that were said in the survey. Things like, I really hate the fact that I'm banned from walking into the library, which is not true. And we know that there's been so much confusion because there hasn't been a consistent source of what online students do and do not have access to. And so we've created a resource, and I'll share how to get to that resource in a bit. And so we'd love your support in sharing that as kind of like the one source of truth on what resources online students can utilize. And then we're also working to provide more support to academic units. We know that historically, the programs that exist that are fully online or distance education programs really have been built out of the entrepreneurship and ingenuity of the departments and the colleges themselves. And we're really working to develop a network to bring program managers or those involved with the management of online programs together to share resources and ideas and tips. We're providing some additional support for marketing and creating more awareness around our online programs, hopefully to help lift all boats that are servicing online students. And for those of you who are interested, here's how you can get to the full listing of student resources. So you can go to valsonline.utk.edu, go to student experience, and then student resources. And that is that one source of truth that we would love to socialize about with recommendations on the services that students have access to. And that's the list that perhaps we can continuously remind students of as they progress in their academic journey at UT. And ultimately, here's what we're striving towards. This is one more student quote, a student who says that they had been out of school for 28 years, and they weren't necessarily engaged with a lot of resources during their undergraduate experience, but in their online program at UT, they've utilized the online access to the library, webinars, access to LinkedIn Learning, support from OIT, they got financial aid support, they worked with the Writing Center, they even participated in more student groups. This is what we strive for, and I think with some of the efforts that we're working towards, we want to make this a more consistent experience, because we know to date, not everyone is aware of all of these resources and opportunities that they have at UT. And so with that, I'd love to hear any questions that you have for me. We have, if you want to use the chat for questions, we do have a moderator who will relay questions to me, or you can feel free to unmute yourself and provide it audibly.
Currently, there are no questions in the chat.
Thank you, Katie.
I have a quick question, Josh. This is Sally Harris. How many, do you know offhand, and this may be something you need to look up, how many total graduate programs online do we have and undergraduate programs do we have at the university?
Yes, great question. So we have a total of just over 70 programs online. And I say programs intentionally because a lot of those are certificates. So as far as degrees are concerned, we have four online undergraduate degrees. And then we have, I want to say around 30, somewhere between 30 and 35 online graduate degrees, which includes master's and doctoral. We have one undergraduate certificate right now that's available online out of agriculture. It's the horticultural therapy certificate. And then about 30 odd graduate certificates. And I'll say 30 odd standalone graduate certificates. So we talk about, we only focus on the certificates that a student can take as a non-degree student, as a path of enrollment. There are a few other certificates that students may be enrolled in as part of their degree program that are only available if you're also in the Doctor of Nurse Practitioner, for example.
Okay. Those 30 graduate certificates that are standalone, that you don't have to be enrolled in another program, those, because they're labeled graduate, they do have to have an undergraduate degree before enrolling in them. That's correct, right?
I am 90% sure that is correct. I believe that the admissions requirement for a graduate certificate is an undergraduate degree. I would want to confirm with the graduate school that I have not just lied to all of you.
Thank you.
We have a question in the chat. Do any of our online programs require foreign language learning, especially undergraduate levels for online programs?
Yes, great question. So typically the general education requirements for our undergraduate programs so first off, the programs all of our programs are the same, residential and online, right? So we don't have this kind of separate campus, so to speak, that's running its own degrees with different curriculum. So any degree requirements that exist for an undergraduate program or a graduate program exist agnostic of the modality, right? And so for our undergraduate programs right now, it really depends on what the foreign language requirement is for that program. But I do know that the interdisciplinary program out of the College of Arts and Sciences, the Bachelor's of Arts in Interdisciplinary Programs, it does require I want to say it's either 2 or 4 semesters of a foreign language. And so I know that the college is working to provide opportunities for students to meet that degree requirement.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Josh, this is Cindy Welch. I have a question about sharing the results of the survey. We're one of the programs, Information Sciences, has been around a while, but I think we are so grounded in our own that it would be awesome if we could have access to your insights or OLAP's insights about what came out of that survey. So, and even just to be able to share this session with my department, I think would be a nice option. Would that be something we could do?
Yes, absolutely. So at a minimum, I can absolutely provide this slide deck so that this can be available and be socialized. And we can find opportunities to distill some of the survey feedback in a meaningful way. I'm not gonna lie, so with the open response, that's like 50 pages worth of Qualtrics text, and I've distilled out and pulled out a few key quotes, right? So I don't know that I want to I don't want to inundate people with hundreds of pages of survey data, but we can find a way to distill it into something meaningful and send that out. Absolutely. I also can provide, for those that have an online program, I would be happy to provide the full details of program information as well. So students enrolled in your program, so you can see some of their specific feedback.
Gosh, that would be awesome. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm being told we have 5 minutes still for questions.
Hey Josh, it's Bill Nowling. More kind of a comment than a question, but maybe food for thought. I teach in the strategic comm program, so it's all asynchronous, all online, and I'm also remote. I live in Michigan, and I'm on faculty, and I teach full-time at the school. So one of the things that I would encourage you all to look at would be, what resources can you make available to teachers like me who are remote? Technology and different things. I mean, I've taken it upon myself to invest in certain technology to level up the learning experience. But I think we're going to see more and more teachers that are going to be more remote and not on campus to take advantage of the great facilities that we have there on a regular basis. So just something to kind of put in mind. And I really appreciated the comments about the connecting, from the students saying that they want to connect with their teachers. I made a point of requiring one-on-one Zoom meetings with all my students. It took 3 weeks to get it done, and I mean, it was a heavy lift, but it has done so much to increase the engagement with students who don't have any interaction with me other than with a video or email. So I can't stress how important that is to maintain that, and that comes a lot from my experience in the private sector doing consulting, is that you can work remotely, but you still need to see each other. You still need to make that connection.
Yeah.
So just a couple comments.
Yeah, thank you so much, Bill. And I think you're right. I think that's what you described for your asynchronous course is a great model. And I think, I imagine students responded very, very well to that. And so that's a way to still provide the greatest amount of flexibility that asynchronous courses provide, but still ensure that there is that connection. And that can, of course, foster further conversations and relationships. And it just changes the nature of a way in which a student interacts with you probably throughout the rest of the semester. So I think that's a great practice and a great recommendation for an asynchronous course to get to some of the things that we were talking about that students maybe say that they wish that they had if they were in a fully asynchronous program. And then thank you for your comment as far for resources. I know we've focused a lot on resources to support the teaching and learning. We don't have a lot of technology that's out like on loaner kind of across campus or throughout campus. But if you're not familiar with our office, and we just did a full web rebrand, right? So the URL has changed, but all of our services for faculty are available at onlinelearning.utk.edu. So onlinelearning.utk.edu. I'm sure someone from our team can put the URL in the chat. And so we are working to develop a full community of offerings. So we just launched a new community of practice group for those who are teaching online. We have our online learning and leadership brown bag sessions on Fridays, and we actually have one this Friday as well. I know a few people who are in the chat here or have presented there. And then we also open the opportunity for consultations to meet one-on-one with an instructional designer or one of our video team members to talk through just different challenges or questions that people have, or even just I'm trying to think about how to structure this assignment in an online or asynchronous environment. How can we do that? So our office is here and able to support in that way as much as we can. Maybe have time for one more question.
If I may, I had a comment/question to backing up Professor Nolan's comment. I'm teaching Italian as a foreign language online. I noticed that some of my students do benefit from visualizing strictly on the screen. Some have disabilities, learning disabilities, attention deficit disorders. And I noticed that has been really helpful to them, in addition to meeting one-on-one, requiring that office hour does make a difference. But my question following that is, in your statistics, do you have any number in regard to the disabilities, the learning disabilities students?
That's a really great question, and we didn't ask that question specifically, so I don't have any data to support that. I have seen in the literature in general sometimes that online learning can be a destination for those who find that they learn better in a place in which they can kind of watch lectures on their own time and things like that. And so perhaps that online learning can be a destination for students, but I don't have any data specific to UT.
All right, thank you.
Thank you all so much. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.